So why don't we invite our guests to the front, and I'll just make a few remarks, but when we do that. So Dr. McKnight, good to see you. Come on up. And your team, President Silvestri, good to see you. And the first item we're going to go over is the financial report. So whoever else needs to be up for that, maybe Brian Hall, I think, Brian Stockton, Rob Riley, Thomas Clausing, Mr. Alfonso Windsor, whoever needs to be up. All right, thank you. Well, very excited to be here and be with you all, and I'm excited to be in this new role. Obviously, I was on the Education and Culture Committee for the last 4 years, but now get the opportunity to chair it. And I want to, it's kind of a surreal moment because I sat up here for a long time with Council Members Navarro and Rice. Councilmember Rice chaired this committee for eight years, and so just want to give them a shout out for all their work. We're also joined by our great staff here, Ms. Nicole Rodriguez-Hernandez and Essie McGuire. This is sadly Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez's last meeting with us on the E&C committee. So if we took a selfie before just to commemorate that, but just want to thank her publicly for all her work over multiple parts of the councils, individual Councilmember Rice's office, central staff, and we know you're going to still always be part of the family. So glad to have you here. This is a really important meeting, first meeting, kind of a tone-setting meeting for our work on the E&C committee and here at the council, where we're going to talk about some of the demographic trends of MCPS, where the financials are, lay the groundwork for the initial CIP conversation. But at a point, and Dr. McKnight, you and I have talked about this, where at no point in our history has the role and function of public education been more important. Coming out of these last 2.5, almost 3 years now, I know as a parent, I've talked to many of parents, I know many people, every family has been impacted, God bless you, by this last couple of years. And we are at an inflection point, which you've talked about. And so have you, President Silvestri, and your board members, about how do we make sure that the value proposition of MCPS that we all believe in, a high-quality education for every student, support for every family, is a reality in the midst of a changing world, right? And changing demographics, which we'll talk about later. I think a lot of, some people say, well, MCPS has changed, but we've been changing. Over the course of my lifetime, over the last 40 to 50 years, we are an entirely different school system. And we have to be prepared to meet the needs of our current school system and the ones that are coming in the future. And that's going to require all of us to step back and look at what we've done and what we are doing and probably make some adjustments and some additions and some tweaking. But it's important that we do so in a transparent manner. So I sent you and my colleagues a letter talking about some of the themes that I think are going to be really important as we navigate this new period in MCPS's future, talking about the need for data and analysis in our meetings to really dig deep and show for the public and for ourselves what's working, what's not, why isn't it? And coming to these meetings, you know, really prepared to talk about that. And working with you and our staff to make sure that we have that information ahead of time and as much gets into the packet so that we can really dig into it when we have these meetings. One of the things I've noticed over the last 4 years is we can never meet enough. And so the more prepared we come to talk about this, it's going to put us in a better position to do the CIP, to have the budget conversations, and to really have the public understand why we're taking the steps we need to take. And I know you have that same commitment. We've talked about it. And that letter is in the packet for anyone who wants to see it. I'm confident we can do it because I know the professionals that are at MCPS. As the parent of 2 students in MCPS, I know the dedication of our employees, of all of our educators. All the hearts are in the minds are in the right place. We just have to work together to get it done. So I want to turn to my colleagues to see if they have any opening remarks, and then I want to turn to you, Dr. McKnight, to see if you have any opening remarks. Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Chairman Jawando. First, I just want to acknowledge your leadership. I'm thrilled to be serving on you in this committee along with Councilmember Mink. I think this does provide a wonderful bridge in transition. I had the opportunity to attend a number of the Education and Culture committees, and we had a number of joint sessions with the Health and Human Services Committee, and we will be having many of those now as well, because the work crosses over in a number of different ways. I appreciated your comments. I can't really add to them. I thought they were excellent. And I appreciated your letter and very much associate myself with all of the recommendations laid out in that letter. So look forward to working with you.
Councilmember Mink. There we go.
Hey, it's my first time, everybody. First time in the committee room. Yes, thank you, Dr. McKnight. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I am really delighted to be sitting on this committee with Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Albornoz, as a MCPS graduate myself, as a former MCPS teacher, now as a parent of an MCPS student. This is extremely important to me and very dear to my heart. We are at a critical point in budgeting for our school system and budgeting for our kids' needs, our teachers' needs, our staff's needs. It's a difficult moment. We're going to have to make some difficult decisions. We're going to really have to do some digging to find creative solutions, and I look forward to being a partner in that. I absolutely want to echo Councilmember Jawando's comments from his letter and here today about the importance of transparency and how that really requires the greatest level of detail possible, especially as we make these very difficult budget decisions. The public is well aware of how much of the county budget goes to our school system. I very much support that. I think that is truly reflective of our values here, and we want to make sure that we are being as transparent and clear with the public as possible, that we are all going to be excellent stewards of that budget. So thank you all. Look forward to our conversation today and moving forward.
Councilman Lupi, would you like to say anything?
The light's not there, but I'm going to guess that it's on.
Left, far left.
I did.
Yeah, you're on.
Oh, okay. It just doesn't light up. All right.
Welcome to the council.
Thank God for all that theatrical training. I can improvise. No, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I am not a member of the Education and Culture Committee, but I am a member of the Public Safety and HHS committees, which also overlap in my background with school safety and K-12 behavioral threat assessment and data. So in my past life, I was counsel to the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center, and so data and analysis and analytics to inform policy making are incredibly important to me in my professional work. But I also have 4 MCPS students, so I have 2 in high school, 1 in middle school, and 1 in elementary school, so I get to see all the many things at all the many levels. So this is also very incredibly personal to me as well, and I look forward to collaborative work across the different committees to help benefit our MCPS students. Thank you.
You're here. And you have the unique thing here. Councilmember Albornoz and I were the ones that had 4 children. Now we've added another 4 children parent to the council, so we're batting pretty high. So I want to turn it over to President Silvestri probably first, and then Dr. McKnight for any opening remarks.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Jawando and members of the committee, Albornoz, Mink, and welcome, Ms. Luki. We are so excited to be working with you once again on behalf of the Board of Education with our most important constituency, our students' families in Montgomery County. We are ever grateful for the Education Committee's support, as well as the whole County Council, to make sure that every student in our school system from every zip code has the best quality education. And that's what we're here to do and continue to do. As the former chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, I led the effort to develop our strategic plan, and our priorities are academic excellence, family engagement, and operational and professional excellence. This year, the board has identified 4 priorities within the strategic plan, and that's increasing math and literacy, building a safe and inclusive school climate, supporting two-way communication, and improving recruitment, retention, and equitable distribution of our staff throughout the system. I know that the committee shares the board's commitment and focus on evaluating our programs for return on investment. Councilmember Jamondo, we also expect the elements that you have outlined in your letter to us: data-driven decision-making, accountability and focus on outcomes. The data and the outcomes should show us the direction that we need to go, and timely information so that these discussions can be more productive. The board asked the committee to help us fund our strategic plan and board priorities as we work together to build a world-class education system that our students deserve. And with that, I turn it over to Dr. McKnight.
All right, thank you so much, President Silvestri, and good morning, everyone. So good to be here. I, too, was so excited about our first Education and Culture Committee Chair meeting, because there's so much that we do together and so much that we have to do together, and so I was looking forward to us getting started in this period of what I will refer to sometimes as a reconstruction period of education, because that's exactly where we are. I did want to say, Ms. Rodriguez, I did not know this was your last meeting. It has been a pleasure to work with you over the past 3 years, truly. So we will miss you, and I wish you well, and looking forward to continuing to work with you, Ms. McGuire, as always. Indeed, it's a pleasure. And I want to go back to mentioning reconstruction, because I think it's really, really important as we have the conversations around where we are now and where we need to go, in acknowledging that ever since March of 2020, everything about public education, everything about education, quite frankly, just shifted as a result of COVID-19. So today in education, students' needs are very different than what they had been. And we see it every day in so many different ways. In the ways that we support our parents to be able to support our students, it's very different. And we have to be able to meet that need. In the way that we have to work with the state constantly to advocate to no longer fit a square peg into a round hole, because there are so many policies and things that were constructed for a different time. All of that's happening at the same time, and we put that into the context of Montgomery County, the largest school system within the state, the most diverse community, which is a strength of ours in so many different ways, and a very mobile county in which people come and move and live here, one, because of the education that we have provided and that we will continue to provide, but also because this is an area that is around the nation's capital. And so along with that comes excitement. I mean, there are so many things in which we are able to pave the way, in which I'm excited about. And so, I look forward to us celebrating those things, because I know it will happen in the space in which we are able to do that. But there are also some challenges that come with it. The way that we have to staff in the largest school system within the state and in the surrounding area of so many other public school systems is a challenge. As we think about as our numbers grow, yes, we have returned to pre-pandemic numbers, but the need is much more significant. Our international enrollment about doubles the regular enrollment of our students that come into the school system. And so when you put all of that together, when I use the word reconstruction, it truly is that the way that we have done things in the past and the way that we have operated prior to pre-pandemic is no longer how we need to operate, and no longer will it allow us to be able to make the significant growth and give the promise to our students that we need to be able to provide for them. And so as we start our work together with this amazing Education and Culture Committee moving forward, many of our conversations will be about that construction and how we do that, and we do that together along with so many other committees. Councilmember Lukey, like we said earlier, we worked so closely together last year, and it's really difficult now to think about education without thinking about the mental health, social emotional support that is provided for a student so that they can be available for learning. And even our students who are thriving, I must also say, they're living in a very different world. I was speaking to someone earlier, and I said, and I will tell you, as a parent, one of the most difficult things is we've had our experiences, we've grown up, but it was different. We did not have cell phones. We did not have likes. We did not have ways in which our children and our young people self-validate in different ways that we have to help support them through today. And so as we do that, we have to constantly consider, how do our structures continue to meet the needs so that they can be available to learn, be well, and most importantly, be college and career and community ready. And that's what we are going to be committed to doing alongside you. I echo Ms. Silvestri's sentiments when she said we are looking forward to the partnership, because indeed it is exciting. And Councilmember Jawando, when you sent over your letter, we were excited to receive it, because quite frankly, all of the interests that you laid out in that letter are our interests as well. And so as we are working towards those same interests, you know, I know that this is going to lead to success in what we do. We're going to be very attentive to results. The reason we're going to be very attentive to results is because over the past 2 years and quarter, which I'm just not going to say 2.5 years, our data has just been limited, I would say, in terms of a researcher. It's been limited because we were working under very different, not normal conditions, and there were so many impacts happening in and around our community as it related to COVID-19 and social-emotional wellness needs, and we were not even consistent at the state level in terms of the types of data that we were submitting because of all of the changes that were happening. And so now getting back to that results, and us actually defining for our community how we're defining that line of college and career and community readiness with benchmarks from elementary all the way through high school, beyond high school, is exactly what we're doing. And so we look forward to being able to share this with you and our community, because monitoring how we do on those results will tell us whether we're moving in the right direction and where we need to do work. With that, to evaluate the impact of our programs and guide funding towards innovation that works, again, is exactly where we are. I'm excited having an opportunity to work with the Deputy Superintendent and Mr. Hull. You know, we made a commitment this year to say, you know what, we're going to go and evaluate all the programs that we have had over the past 5 to 7 years in Montgomery County and start with, where do we see results? And actually look at that results prior to the pandemic, and then look at the results during the pandemic, because it actually tells you two different stories. And so that's a process we've already started. And we're also going to remain responsive to the needs of our community and stakeholders. During COVID-19, and I know Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Abernos, we talked a lot about communication and how we all, in so many different ways, took a hit, and how we had to communicate with our community in a way that met everyone's needs, because the information about our children and how they were doing was so critical. And so we've continued to make that commitment in building many different structures to not just send out messages from MCPS, but to make sure we commit to having a two-way street of communication, meaning as much as we're putting out, we're receiving just as much. And we're receiving that from all stakeholders within our community. And that's not separated by race, by culture, by socioeconomic background. So those are the commitments that I'm excited about, that align clearly to what you've shared, Councilmember Jawando. And in the light of results today, I'm going to have a press conference, and I will be sharing about our student progress and the areas of focus that we're going to take moving forward in Montgomery County Public Schools. We have the state will be releasing the data overall for the state tomorrow, but I felt it was really important to foreshadow for our community where we currently are. And I want to do this because I want this to be a starting point for our community to see, here's where we are. And we've got to get all of our children to that line of college, career, and community ready. And I'm going to say above the line, way above the line. And so looking at where we are today and what we need to do moving forward is going to be critical. Just a few things I wanted to make sure. I know today we're talking about capital, and I'm excited to talk about our capital budget, because I also believe the capital is a way that we become very responsive to our community needs, and we in many ways try to reconcile opportunities that need to be reconciled that have not happened over time. And so as I think about that, know that our operating budget and our capital budget are closely aligned, you know, especially when you think about like the Maryland future legislation, our blueprint. I mean, there are so many things that are just going to continue to overlap. So I think more now than ever, we're going to be talking about what that overlap looks like as we all continue to build out the blueprint, because we will be leading that effort in a very unique, different, and innovative way in Montgomery County Public Schools, and so I will continue to do that. I'll just say a few things I want to make sure I note at the top of mind in the key priorities that are in my operating budget that I recommended to the Board of Education, that they're considering at this time, are really focused on three things. And if you could just have that in your minds as we move into the conversation about capital. The first is, in MCPS, our operating budget must ensure that our per pupil funding meets our students' needs. I talked a lot about that in my budget release, but when we compare ourselves to other counties, when we think about where our per pupil funding had been in the past, where it is today, and the needs today, that is something that we must focus on. The second is that our operating budget must invest in our employees. Earlier I spoke about things being very different, there being much opportunity for innovation, and our educators, our staff, they're leading that effort on the forefront. And so we must make sure that we're continuing to invest in them so that we can, one, keep them, that they feel valued, and that all the professional development that we are implementing, that we're known for implementing to keep our employees in a successful space of providing our students, we want to keep them because we've made that investment. So that's another area that I will continue to refer back to. And then third, we have to invest in supports for our schools and students. We have to accelerate in learning recovery and be very innovative in how we move forward in teaching and learning. And when I say innovative, let's just for a moment think back to a century ago. If you were to see a picture from 100 years ago of a classroom, what would it look like? Desk, student sitting in it, and the teacher in the front. A century ago. So we have really got to really embrace innovation in different ways when we think about our needs. And I think that innovation can balance us meeting student needs as well as it balances meeting the needs of the employees who have to invest in our students. And so I think with this thinking, I think with our commitment to looking at results, our commitment to be innovative, our commitment to continue to monitor data and hold ourselves accountable for what we do for our students is exactly what is going to help us flourish into the next level of education in Montgomery County Public Schools. And so I just wanted to share those things with you just to lay some foundation, because I know we'll talk about a lot of things, but I wanted to make sure I emphasize the connection between the capital as well as the operating budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight, President Silvestri. I also just wanted to acknowledge two other board members that are here. Board member Grace Rivera Oven and board member Lynn Harris, I believe, is here as well. Hiding, there you go. They're not hiding, but I can see. And also want to acknowledge MCEA and our principals union. That you got two partners, and I don't know if SEIU is here, but we love them too. In that we're all going to have to do this together. And I'm really happy to see everyone here at this kind of first meeting to set the tone. Couldn't agree with you more that we always have to be thinking about the connection of the capital budget with the operating. So I appreciate you providing those high-level considerations as we move into it. Obviously, the order in which we go is the capital budget was sent over, so we're going to start with that. And the board is considering the operating, and we'll get to that very soon too. But I do think it's important to keep both of those things in mind. One of the things we started in the previous council, which I want to turn to now, is the financial updates, the quarterly financial updates, where as part of this transparency and accountability that we all are agreeing upon, that we just look into where things are and we know the state of the system, and so we're all starting from the same, I love the way you put it, from the same baseline. You know, when you have your press conference later today, this is where we are and this is where we need to be. And I think this is an important part of that. So want to turn it over to our staff to help guide us through the financial update.
Good morning, council members, Chair Jawando, and of course, President Silvestri and Dr. McKnight. Thank you for your kind words. It's definitely a bittersweet moment, but I'm excited to have one committee meeting with the new Education and Culture Committee today. And thank you all, MCPS team, for being here for this committee meeting. As Chair DeWando mentioned in his letter, which can also be found on circle page 1 of our staff report, today's meeting will also discuss the MCPS financial update in line with the data-driven decision-making and accountability and focus on outcome priorities to strengthen the relationship and collaboration between the Council and Montgomery County Public Schools. As noted, we receive monthly financial reports from MCPS pursuant to the Annotated Code of Maryland, and we'd like to begin again these financial updates approximately every quarter. And today's meeting will focus on since the adoption of the FY23 operating budget to around October of 2022. So on May 26th, the County Council approved a $2.9 billion budget for FY23, and the board later adopted that same budget on June 7th. There was a $137.9 million increase from FY22 for the total appropriation and $86.4 million increase over maintenance of effort. And as the Council exercises its fiscal authority with MCPS, including the ability to appropriate by state law the funding amounts and sources, but does not have the ability to direct the Board of Education on how it allocates its funding. You will see a summary of the monthly financial reports from June of 2022, September in 2022, and October of 2022 to exercise its role in that fiscal authority. So the chart at the bottom of page 2 and starting on page 3 highlights recent and actual projected revenues, expenditures, and fund balance amounts. And I want to highlight both the line items on the amount used to fund the FY22, 23, and projected 24 budget, as well as the beginning year fund balance. And these are really important as the Council looks at the upcoming operating budget, as well as any supplemental appropriations that come to the Council from the Board of Education. And so what is fund balance? For MCPS, appropriated funding that is unspent or unencumbered at the end of the fiscal year becomes fund balance. And under state law, these funds are only available for use by the school system. However, these funds cannot be spent unless and until they are reappropriated by the Council. As noted in the chart above, the MCPS FY22 and FY23 operating budgets originally requested the reappropriation of $25 million in fund balance. However, towards the FY23 operating budget process, MCPS requested to ultimately utilize $35 million in reappropriated fund balance from FY22. And Council staff notes its importance of the fund balance as it is a funding source. In addition, it is beneficial as it does not further impact maintenance of effort requirements. And as noted, the Council's select fiscal and reserve policy states that MCPS should not have a reserve. So when we look at FY23, we know that there was this $10 million increase in reappropriated fund balance, and MCPS notes that they implemented a early spending cutoff to achieve that $10 million increase from their original request. And as this was later in the operating budget process, Council staff also asked MCPS Finance to determine what line items were impacted with both the $10 million increase in the reappropriation and also for the fact that while the Council approved a 5% increase in the FY23 operating budget over FY22, it was less than the MCPS's and Board of Education's original FY23 request. As you can see at the bottom of page 3, MCPS notes that majority of its reduction was in line with $30 million reduced from their employee benefits plan and also about $8 million in contractual services, part-time efforts, program supplies, and instructional materials. Another highlight from the review of the monthly financial reports is relating to the start of year fund balance for FY23. And you'll see at the top of page 4 that there's a chart highlighting both the start of year fund balances for FY21, FY22, and FY23. In FY23, MCPS began with a $9.9, almost $10 million fund balance. And MCPS notes that the higher than expected fund balance was due to 3 main reasons. The first was the June 30th, 2022 reimbursement of $3.6 million from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. The second was a final reimbursement of $2.2 million from the Interagency Coordinating Board for the Community Use of Public Facilities, or CUF. And the third was unanticipated revenue receipts late in the fiscal year, specifically from MCPS Department of Transportation vendors. And so that concludes our conversation on the fund balance and FY23 operating budget. But I do want to talk about ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds that MCPS received due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, before we move on there, let's just pause for a second. Is there anything that you all want to say based on that report and clarify, or I know you work together with our staff, but anything to add? No? Okay. Then let's move on. Thank you. Hold on. Any questions from colleagues?
All right. And so the Education and Culture Committee continues to comprehensively review and approve, as it did, the ESSER funds awarded to MCPS. As you'll see at the top of page 5, that there's a summary chart on both the 3 ESSER grants MCPS has received, and the budgeted amount, how much has been spent through October 31st, 2022, and the funds available. In ESSER 1, MCPS...
So, Ms. Hernandez, just one of the things I want to do could you describe what ESSER is for the millions watching at home?
Sure. So, ESSER grants were awarded through the federal government to meet the needs impacting the school system from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so ESSER 1 was required to be spent by September 30th, 2022. And you can see at the chart at the bottom of page 5 that has been achieved. And the focus areas were in English for speakers of other languages, non-public schools required by the federal government, professional development, technology, and benefits to staff. For ESSER 2, MCPS has until September 30th of 2023 to finish utilizing that grant award. So they had a budgeted amount of $112 million. They've expended about 86, and there's about 26 remaining. And of course, this is from October of 2022 as well. And so the newest monthly financial report will have updated numbers, most likely through the end of the year, 2022. And ESSER 3, will be expended through September 30th, 2024. And after that, at this time, there is no expectation for additional ESSER funds from the federal government. And so FY24 operating budget does have that in mind, the fact that ESSER funding will be used and eliminated by that point, September 2024. And you can see that they had a budget amount of, oh gosh, a large number, but I'm trying to find $252 million. I remember approving that one, and that was a large number. And that they have approximately, they have allocated that funding for both FY22, FY23, and projected it through FY24 as well. But there's approximately a total of $165 million remaining as of October 2022. So again, some of that may have been expended since then, remaining in total ESSER funds. And while that funding is available, it has been allocated in the multitude of categories that you can see at the top of page 7. So that is the ESSER funding summary.
Thank you. I have a couple questions just related to that, and wanted to back up one. I did have a question on some of, one of the things we hear a lot of, and with the cuts that were made, cuts is probably the wrong word, the reallocations, we hear a lot about the special education ability to staff those classrooms and how that's going, and how our budget is relating to that. I want to allow you just the opportunity to comment on where is that as of today as far as the staffing with the special education classrooms and educators, and how you see, if at all, this money helping with that and going forward into the operating budget.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you mean the ESSER money?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So, so this year we started out with, we opened up the first day of school with about 167 vacancies for teachers of special education. I believe today we're somewhere around 70?
Less than 50.
Oh, less than 50. Less than 50. And so we have been working with our associations to think about ways in which we can be very creative and ways in which we can incentivize. So, one of the things that we worked with our associations on at the beginning of the year was looking at our teachers who are dually certified. They may be certified in special education, and then another subject, and trying to see if they would be willing to make the move from a general area to special education. So we're going to continue to do that. Where we're going to get more bang for our buck, which is, again, a long-term plan. Every time we look at a situation like this is a perfect example. You have to have something that puts the Band-Aid on the problem right then, and then you have to put something in place to stop the bleeding over time. Is working with our local universities, in which I know we've already started some initiatives in working with them to bring in students to get that certification in ways that we can incentivize them while they're in school for the things that matter to them, whether it may be, like our Terrapin Teachers Program, paying them while they are in college, and being even more creative about how we do that at the university level to build that pipeline. We get a number of teachers who are certified through our Towson program, which is held there at USG. It's so exciting when I go out to schools and visit, they often tell me, I came out of that program. So I know that's one that we're looking forward to, as we have some recent retirees actually from the field of special education who are working with that program at USG to help us build that pipeline. So a number of things in the works.
Appreciate that. So 160 at the start of the year, now less than 50. Not we're perfect, but that's progress. It's a lot of progress. So.
Absolutely, and progress considering that as new students come in, they just don't enroll at the beginning of the year, they roll throughout the year. And with those needs, that then requires the staffing to change. So, yep, we're trying to hold steady there. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Just wanted to follow up and see if you'd be able to give us a more detailed breakdown of where the staffing vacancies are.
I don't know if we have that. That may be something we can follow up and send back to you.
That would be great. That would be great. Yeah, paras, teachers, bus drivers, counselors, and so on.
Yep,
Thank you.
We can send all of our current vacancies over.
That'd be great. Yeah, I was going to say, just the whole list.
Yeah, great.
I know that's been a thing. Bus drivers, it's like, it's putting out fires. Bus driver was a big one at the beginning of the year. We're trying to get people to school. So, understand you're dealing with a lot.
Sorry, one
Yeah,
more.
go ahead.
Also, if it would be possible to get a picture of what turnover looks like in all those different categories, that would be helpful as well. Where are we losing people more and so on? To get those numbers would be great. Thanks.
Wonderful. All right. So, yes, Councilman Robbins.
Thank you, Chair Jawando. Just and I don't need an answer now, but just sort of an overview. Obviously, there was a huge infusion of federal funding over these last 2 years, and a better breakdown of how those funds were utilized, and then what we anticipate going into this current year's operating budget, because we won't be able to count on those funds, and obviously any concerns of any gaps or holes that may create.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. I did want to say we have every year when we put forward the recommendation of the operating budget, have taken some things off of ESSER each time to try and build into the operating budget over time so that the cliff is not such a steep cliff. But we will certainly send that over to you, but that's something that we have continued to watch from the moment that we received that funding. I know some of my partners around the state and the nation are having trouble spending those funds, but that is not our problem in MCPS.
More foreshadowing for the operating budgets. It's always looming. It's always looming. All right, so I think we'll turn to Councilmember Mink, sorry. Go ahead.
One more follow-up question in regards to the staffing or related to staffing. If we could get information on where we have had to combine classes and what classes those were, so including specifics about grade levels, different schools, details about that would be really helpful, as well as we're looking at how that has intersected with staffing, as we might want to split those classes back up in future when we're able to, and so on. So that would be really helpful. And then, again, looping back to ESSER and operating budget questions, curious about what the process is, what your process with regards to evaluating the accelerator programs that are funded by ESSER, to determine which programs we should attempt to continue with local funds after those ESSER funds are depleted.
Yes, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hull and the staff in just a moment to talk about the evaluation process specifically. But I did want to circle back to the class sizes. So I have said and have committed this to our community. We still follow the guidelines of class size limits. That has not changed. There was never an expectation that we would do anything different as it relates to that. I believe, of course, maybe there are some things happening in all of our 210 schools in which I don't, maybe some decisions are being made to relieve an immediate need, but that there was never an expectation or a plan for any classes to be combined specifically. So I just wanted to say that because I wanted to make sure we clarified that. But we will send over to you anything that I guess would beg our attention of something that would be not meeting class size limits.
I don't know if necessarily there, so this is a question that I've had from some parents across the district. I don't know if they're necessarily saying that the classes are now, larger, oversized, but there has been a question about whether classes are being combined and then maybe, and maybe still remaining, still following our standards, but whether there has been any even temporary combining of classes, and it would be, it'd be helpful to just have that full picture for transparency, even if it's temporary, or, this may be something that is just, principals are making decisions, if they need to, or if we are able to reach out to schools and just clarify and be able to reassure parents that that is not happening, then that would be great as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember, let me let you finish the answer question on the second part, and then I'll go to Councilmember. Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So we are looking very closely at all of the programs that we have funded through ESSER this year. We've been meeting throughout the year to do that because we know that there are a large number of investments on ESSER, and they're not all going to fit on the operating budget, and so there is going to be some hard choices that need to be made. And so Dr. Murphy and myself have been working with the teams to make sure that we know exactly what those programs are, how much the cost is, and then how we're going to be, or how we are evaluating them throughout this year, so that when we get to this late spring and the summer, and we start looking at the FY25 budget, we are able to have those discussions based on the data and the evaluations that we've been able to produce.
And just to follow up on that, so you've submitted the operating budget to the board, right? And so presumably some of that information was used in the presentation of that budget?
Yes, some of it. I'll call out specifically, like our college tracks program. That was one that we just had a recent program evaluation for that showed that it absolutely benefited first-generation college students, students of color more specifically, who, when compared to those who did not receive that program but were in the same circumstances. So yes, we've started the process, but
There's still some to come.
it's still some to come, and reason being, prior to COVID-19, the Office of Shared Accountability was on a rotation of always evaluating programs. As a result of COVID-19, the program evaluation just did not continue in the cycle that it had been for 2 years. So now that we're coming back to that, that's why it's taking us longer, but we've been able to start that and get some of our programs evaluated.
Appreciate that. So just note to staff, I don't want to veer too far into that, but when we do take up the operating budget, I think it'll be important to have as much of the evaluation information kind of in there, related in the package, so that we can be comparing in real time. I think that'll be helpful. Councilmember Lukey.
Yes, this is a follow-up to the questions that Councilmember Mink had asked you to get some follow-up data on. And one of the scenarios that was playing out was there were situations where there were long-term substitutes used in particular classrooms who weren't capable of teaching the subject that they were there to teach. So, for example, foreign languages. So if a student had a long-term substitute in the classroom who did not actually speak the language that they were hired to teach the class on, those students weren't getting that education for a quarter, 2 quarters, then they're behind when there is a teacher who is a subject matter instructor to come in, and that had a very negative effect. For example, same thing with various mathematics classes or what have you. If that's not really your, I have a child who asks me, help me with my Algebra 2 homework, and I said, that's great, I haven't done that in 40 years, so please don't ask me that
And
again.
they're doing it differently.
And they're doing it differently, and I can't explain it. Go ask your stepfather. But that's, that is fundamental to their education. It's different if you're having a substitute for a day here or a day there, absolutely. but when it's extended periods, and that was ongoing, or to Councilmember Mink's earlier comment, combining of classrooms where one teacher was trying to cover more than one classroom because there were just not enough hands available, right? And the stress, of course, that places on our teachers as well as on our students, and tangential issues that arise in classroom management as a result thereof. So it would be really helpful to know how many of those types of scenarios were playing out across the schools, whether it was more of an issue in middle and high school versus at the elementary school level, because that helps to understand what kinds of programmatic things need to be put in place to assist those students moving forward.
All right, let's transition to the CIP discussion. So, Mr. Levchenko, I think is going to come up and give us an overview. Thank you. And as people are taking their seats, just come on up. Just want to again underscore the importance of the connection between the capital budget and everything we do in our schools and to the community. You know, we talked about in the financial update some of the fund balance transfer and that was received. It was a little higher because you had some money from CUF, which is when our residents are using the facilities of MCPS for various community needs. It's a really important feature in addition to the teaching and learning that goes on during the day and in our community schools all during the day and in the evening. Schools really are community hubs. So when we're thinking about how we invest in them, it's important for the daytime, but it's also important for the nighttime. So just wanted to tee that up as we get started. So Mr. Levchenko.
Sure. Yeah, this is, as you mentioned earlier, a kickoff meeting for the CIP. It's got to be the first CIP meeting for the council in total this year, too. And the reason we're doing it so early is because the school's CIP is about a third of the overall CIP. It's a huge driver of the CIP. It, along with transportation, which the T&E committee has to wrestle with, those are the two areas that really drive a lot of the decisions during the CIP review and at the very end when you're trying to reconcile the CIP. So it is important that we get an early start. And we'll get into more of the project specifics at a future meeting. We really wanted to get a big picture today. We have staff here from MCPS, of course. We've asked them to provide some of the information they really provided the board when the board was deliberating on the CIP in terms of some of the big picture enrollment issues, as well as the major projects that they felt they had to revisit. We are in an amendment year. The idea is to try to hold as much of the CIP harmless as you can or unchanged. That's always a challenge with the school CIP. There's so much going on every year that a lot of projects do have to be reopened. As you'll see here, we have initiatives that are moving forward. We have cost increases that are pretty pronounced this year, state aid issues, things like that. So it is a challenge with the school CIP to try to be as limiting as we want to be in an amendment year. But we try our best to honor the biennial nature of the CIP as much as we can. But with that, I suggest we turn to the MCPS staff here. We have Adrian Karamihaus and Seth Adams here to give us a brief overview. And then when they're done, we'll pick it up from here and talk about how the executive's recommendation fits into this, which we just received last week, and some next steps from there.
Sounds good. MCPS, thank you.
Good morning. I am going to go through some of the enrollment information that was presented to the Board of Education during our work session process. So the first slide that you see up there today, you can see that the official September 30th enrollment for MCPS is 160,554. You can see this first slide shows over years the enrollment, the official enrollment, and you can see the 9265 that you see there, that increase is an increase over time from 2013 to the 2022-23 official September 30th enrollment. So you can see that trend over time. The next slide, please. So this is a more detailed information from our September 30th official enrollment. So you can see the first line, this is a comparison slide. So you can see that actually the second column is the official 2021-2022 school year. So last year's school year compared to this year's school year, which is the third column. So you can see for the second column, the official September 30th was 158,232. Again, this year's official September 30th is 160,554. So that is an increase of 2322. We did talk about this actually over the past 2 years during COVID, where we did see a decrease in our enrollment that we knew the students would be returning. This is that returning and that increase that you can see. The 1 year change column, which is the fourth column, you could see where those numbers changed from last year's to this year. So you can see where the increases and decreases are grade by grade. And the last column, what we do is we show what that change is grade to grade. So for example, you can see from kindergarten to first, kindergarten from the previous year, first this school year, we have an increase of 627 students that are now in first grade. I can go through all these, and I guess if there are any questions, we can go back. What do you want to?
Yeah, if there's
going
anything,
through.
you keep going, but if there's anything you want to highlight, for example, I think it's important to elicit for the public that a lot of where the growth is happening the most, right? If you could just bake that into.
Right, so if you look at sort of the second section where we see the K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, we see that growth at the secondary level, at the high school level. And again, we have been talking about this for a number of years. We started at the elementary school where we had huge amounts of growth. We had lots of additions at the elementary school level, new schools that we were building that came online, and we said that that growth would slowly go through the middle schools and high schools. And we are seeing it at the high school level, at the 9-12 level. And that is reflected in the board's requested CIP, where we have a number of additions for high schools, as well as basically 3 new high schools that, or 2 new high schools and one that is a replacement where we're adding a lot of capacity. So that growth is reflected in the CIP. The next slide. This is a slide where we show that annual change. We had been growing, we said, about 2,500 students over the course of now over 10 years. Again, you could see those 2 dips in the 2020 school year and the 2021 school year, where we had that decrease due to COVID. And now again, we are back on the increase. And again, it's over 2,300 students that we have grown this year from last.
Councilmember May?
Quick question, just wondering if we could get the breakdown for enrollment changes in terms of our special ed kids and our LED or ESOL kids, including by school.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful. And I know you mentioned, Dr. McKnight, for example, we doubled, I can't remember, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the large increase of students from other countries, how that would obviously be a big factor here. And which would probably partly explain some of the reason that there's a lot of them are older students too, right?
I think she said half of our growth is international students.
For the data that Councilmember Mink requested with our special education students of transfer in, transfer out, can you indicate which were moved to non-public placement schools? Thank you.
And I know you all are crunching this data and it's important for you, but I think the trends are really important because that's how you project. I know it's an inexact science sometimes, but it's important. Go ahead, continue.
So the next slide. This is another topic that we have brought to you for a number of years, the decline of births over time. So since 2014, we have seen that decline. And you can see from this chart in the second column, we've started as high as in 2014 at about little more than 13,000. And for 2020, the births are down to a little under 12,000, about 11,667 births. So the third column, when you look how that affects our kindergarten and how it affects our growth. So you can see those births in 2017 resulted in about 10,500 kindergartners, which is about 83% of the capture of those births. And so that has an effect on our enrollment over time. Less kindergarten students coming in, that means that trend will continue, but we do have that huge or large growth that we see at the high school level. So as those students leave our school, if the trend continues in the low births, that we will be seeing some of that affect especially at the elementary schools for the short term. We have been hearing, though, that the births will rebound and start to increase over time. And so we are waiting to see when that will happen, but we are at that point where we are still seeing a decline in births over time.
This is an imperfect science, of course, because this also doesn't account the number of people that lived in urban areas that are moving back to suburban areas. So it accounts for births now, but and the trajectory is challenging. And I'll go back, Councilmember Jawando and I know when we were in elementary and middle school through the MCPS process and well, I'm a little bit older than Councilmember Jawando, but in the late 90s.
Thank you for noting that.
Yes, that's right. In the late 90s, many Montgomery County Public School buildings were transferred to another use, and they were consolidated. Some of them were turned over to private schools. Some of them were turned into recreation centers or senior centers. And at the time, it was a budget-related decision that had to be made because that was the recession. But it was short-sighted, and we've been paying for that within the context of the CIP now for the last 15 years. So it is difficult to anticipate what exactly these birth rates mean, these new arriving students, and accommodating that. So I just wanted to underscore this is tough to project out 10, 15, 20 years from now. I acknowledge that.
And the birth rates that we use are just one of many things that we look at when we do our enrollment projections. Turnover, housing, trends in, we just had a conversation with someone letting us over in planning about seeing multiple families in one household. So those are trends that is another thing that we just look at when we do our enrollment projections. It's just one of many things. Okay, next slide. So this is just an example of the breakdown of the previous chart that we looked at. But the first line, you can see the blue line is K through 5. So you can see that official September 30th enrollment as a whole is 68,221. But then that projection you can see is about 68,282. So it's sort of is stable at the K-5 level. The next line that you see, the gray line, is 9 through 12 enrollment. Currently, our official is 52,119 for those 9 through 12 students. But again, the projection that we see for 2027 is an increase of about 5,000 students. It's 57,266. So again, talking about where we're seeing that growth is at the higher level. And for grades 6 through 8, we are currently at 35,906 students. Again, the projection at about 36,651. So again, a modest increase, but again, where we're seeing it is at that secondary 9 through 12 level. And the next slide is enrollment by race and ethnicity. So again, if we're looking at 2022, you can see that breakdown of our 160,000 students. We have talked about this. We have been seeing an increase in our Hispanic population, and that is actually continuing to grow. And you can see that is that top line at 55,563 students. Our white non-Hispanic, again, we have talked about, again, over time that we have seen a decrease. And you can see that population, that student population, about 39,157 students. Our African American students has slowly become a little bit more steady and less increasing at 34,923 students. And finally, our Asian population, again, is somewhat steady over time at 22,257 students. We do identify 2 or more races, and that is that last line of about 8,000 students. You can see where we began to do that, so you did see a sort of a change in each of the student populations. And that line, again, is sort of a steady trend line as well.
Before we move on, Councilmember Mink has a question on this.
Thank you for this. Thank you for this slide. This is really remarkable. I mean, we see this trend. I just really wanted to draw folks' attention to these trend lines here that we see. Hispanic enrollment is climbing dramatically. We see white non-Hispanic enrollment is declining. And also would be interested in getting similar data around the birth rate, if we could get that broken out by, we've got census data by ethnicity, by demographic breakdown, and also geographic breakdown would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Mink. And as I started when we started today, this is who we are. We are. One thing I love about Montgomery County is that we are on the leading edge, the tip of the spear of the diversity and inclusivity that is America, and it's a good thing. I want to emphasize this is a good chart. This is not a bad chart. I think one of the problems we have is that some people assume that this means we have to accept less or that kids can't achieve, and that is not the case. I see them every day. I was just at New Hampshire States with a bunch of first and second graders who, the neighborhood I grew up in, and the brightness and promise of those children it almost blinded me. I needed sunglasses. And so it does mean that we need to change how we serve the needs of our population. And that's the challenge, but also the opportunity for all of us. So I'm glad you highlighted that.
Let me just emphasize that I strongly agree with Councilmember Jawando, with Chair Jawando, and I mean this is why I chose to stay here in large part and raise my kids here. Not just qualitative analysis, but quantitative data shows that children and communities benefit tremendously from increased diversity. And so this is what we are so proud of here in Montgomery County. So the more that we can celebrate this, recognize it, and make sure that we are leaning into finding the most data-based and innovative ways to ensure that we are serving and celebrating our population, the better off we will be.
Amen.
Okay. So that is all of the slides for enrollment. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead and continue into the board's request slides, and then we'll pick it up after that.
Okay. So the first slide here is, these are all the Board of Education's requested amendments. And what we have done, and we did during our presentation, is broke them down into existing projects, previously approved projects that needed additional funding as a result of construction cost increases. So the first slide that you see here are all projects that were previously approved. So for example, Greencastle, Joanne Lealick, Silver Spring, Crown High School, Northwood, Poolsville, and the new Woodward High School. Those were all previously approved projects. The second column, you can see what was the approved total cost of the project. And then the next column is the actual request or amendment by the Board of Education to keep these projects on schedule, but needed additional funding for cost increases. So again, Greencastle, you can see an increase of $4 million. Joanne Lealick at Broad Acres was $14 million. That one actually, and I'm sure Keith will talk about this more, but that one was originally, I'm sorry, wrong project. That was for $14 million. Silver Spring International is for $5 million. Crown High School is for $15 million. Northwood for $30 million. Poolsville High School is to continue that project and finish that project for $8 million. And the new Woodward High School is for $15 million.
Just to speak to the Joanne Lealick project, because I think this is important. Adrienne was starting to talk about it. It's identified as a 3-5 school, but during our conversations with the Board of Education, the superintendent's request, it's a new school to fully meet the needs of all students from pre-K all the way up through 5. So while it reads as a 3-5 right now, it is a change of scope in this request to go to just one larger school to meet the full student population.
I actually was thinking of Burtonsville, which is on the next page. So I got myself I was ahead of schedule. To go on to the next set of amendments, these are for projects for a variety of reasons, and you can see in the last column, it talks about what the request, why the request. So for example, Burtonsville High School, it's an increase of almost $30 million. That was the one I was thinking of. Originally in the previously approved CIP, it was for an addition at Burtonsville, and what the request is now to actually change that from an addition to actually rebuilding a new Burtonsville High School, Burtonsville Elementary School at another location, and so that's the pretty significant increase of almost $30 million. The next one is for our building modification and program improvements, our BIMPI project that we call it. This is, again, it's $10 million, and you can see why the request. The request is to implement the new blueprint for Maryland's future, to modify existing facilities to provide inclusive restroom for students, and to modify existing facilities due to special education program changes and relocations. Do you want to talk about it? The next one is for $10 million. It is for our HVAC program. It's to address the backlog of HVAC projects that are further impacted because of the construction cost increases. Those construction cost increases with supplies has an effect on actually a lot of our projects, not just our construction projects for individual projects, for individual schools, but also for projects like roofs or HVAC. And so this one is certainly one where we needed the additional funding, where the request came from the board. The last one is for our materials management building. It's $2.5 million, and it's to begin the planning, the design for the relocation of the facility. The funds that were previously requested in this project, but were removed during reconciliation in the adopted CIP, so they are again here as part of the request.
Is that's the Rockville facility that is in bad shape? Okay. Yeah, Stone Street. Okay.
And we actually do have, I think, a few updates even from when we went through the superintendent and board process, and that being that we are working very closely with county DGS teams, and we have identified a location to lease in order to start moving off of that Stone Street location. So these funds are critically important. They were originally designed for design funds, site selection, but now that we do have a site that we're zeroing in on, we're hoping to leave this funding in there in order to fund the tenant fit-out work that would be required. So I think that's great news in terms of that community, and one that we're very excited to partner with the county as a whole. But this funding is still really important, even though it is a slight change in scope of what's identified.
You update that, and what's the timeline for that lease?
Hopefully by the end of this school year, we will start to transition in, and then assuming this funding is approved by the council July 1st, we would start to really begin some of the really significant tenant fit-out work this summer.
Councilmember Lukey has a question.
No, these are the figures that are requested of the county, but I was curious whether there was any funding coming from the state and Built to Learn Act funds for any of these projects.
So, and that's a great question, and one that certainly was going to highlight towards the end. Unfortunately, when we talk about the blueprint work, the blueprint obviously is very focused on the operating side, the human capital side. As of to date, there are no funds that will offset the capital budgets. So we're still working through the traditional state funding mechanism that exists. But when we do start to think about the blueprint work, these projects that we are beginning to identify around the BIMPI, we heard about some of our closed facilities. We're really starting to think very differently about reopening those facilities in order to start to set up some of these early education centers, to start to think about how to navigate some of the transitions from half-day to full-day to pre-K programs, PEP programs, and those sorts of functions.
So I was asking about a different law that's related to but different from the blueprint, and so I was asking about whether any of these were eligible for funding under the Built to Learn Act, and had you sought any funding?
Built to Learn is very broad and one that many of the projects that were previously identified are part of the Built to Learn Act. Actually, from a Montgomery County standpoint, we have taken advantage of more blueprint money than any other jurisdiction in the state, and I believe we're a little over $200 million that are part of our blueprint funds that are allocated to many of the projects that you see in this list. But when we do start to think about blueprint, we're going to still have to navigate with the IAC and a few of the other folks in order to figure out, are there key strategic projects that we want to focus on. But I would also acknowledge that the blueprint money is decreasing based on interest rates and a few other factors. So what we started out with is certainly what's eligible now is less than what we obviously began with. So we're being very strategic in terms of how to utilize what is left of that Built to Learn fund.
Councilmember Albernoz, then Councilmember Mink, and then I have a question at the end.
Thank you. Actually, this is a question for staff, and I know, Mr. Levchenko, you started to dig into the county executive's recommended CIP. They're obviously, due to inflation and a number of other issues, cost overruns in other CIP projects. Could you just provide a little bit of context in terms of what you've seen so far in the broader CIP and maybe some challenges that lie ahead in some other projects that we have?
You're going to answer that in a sec. Can we
Yeah, sure.
put a pin in it and come back to that? Because I think Keith's going to present on that in a minute.
Okay.
Right? Is that okay? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
I had some questions about HVAC improvements. What are the standards? So I know that we are gradually improving the HVAC systems, and we have kind of, multiple levels of tiers, and we want to eventually get everybody to the top tier. And so I just wanted some clarity on what are the standards that we're using to determine that, our top tier is good enough, that each of our rooms and classrooms are getting enough, airflow. I had heard something from somebody about the possibility of getting CO2 monitoring, for example, in classrooms. Is that something that we're using? Are there quantitative standards basically attached to HVAC and air quality in each of the rooms in each of the schools?
Yes, that's a great question, and our HVAC program has been a critical program for us, and one that obviously you see $10 million request from the board to add is one that we need to continue to replace aging systems. But yes, we do have what we call our facility condition index that really focuses on the whole building, but there's a component of it that focuses on HVAC. And then there's a part of it, obviously, that looks at indoor air quality. You brought up a couple things around monitors that are going into classrooms. That is a contract that we're working through from an implementation standpoint. We hope to start installing these sensors in all of our classrooms here in the very near future. And they won't just be CO2, they will be VOCs, they will be temperature, because when you think about indoor environmental quality, it's all of those factors, right? You could have great indoor air quality, but if the temperature is 80 degrees, you're impactful. So those are things that we are installing. We're going to be very transparent in terms of what is happening in every classroom across the district. But I would say with over 27 million square feet of facility, HVAC and focusing on the replacement of aging systems is a top priority, and one that I know the board and the superintendent have obviously focused on, that we hope that continues to be a priority of the council as well.
And are those quantitative standards available to the public online currently?
Yes, we publish all of our facility condition information on our website, and it breaks it down into very specific categories, several categories of HVAC that include everything, again, from the plumbing systems to mechanical systems to some of the infrastructure piping, those sorts of things, and all of that is published online.
Okay, great. So we'll follow up to help me track down where the IAQ specifically standards are. And for teachers who are concerned right now about their classrooms or specific classrooms, is there a way that we can get them access to CO2 monitors? If we could even have, if there's like one available per school or per whatever, they're a couple $100 or something like that, so it's expensive for an individual classroom teacher. But there are some teachers who are in older classrooms where they feel like there's less airflow, they feel like the air quality isn't good. Is there a way that we can get them monitors now? And also, what is the timeline for getting those in classrooms that you're hoping to get money?
And we have encouraged schools to reach out to us. Obviously, there's been many cases where we go out and do monitoring. There's been cases where folks have brought in their own monitors, and there's some challenges with everything from calibration, accuracy. So until we get to a point where, again, all this information is very public and transparent, we are asking if there are any concerns to reach out. We'll send a team out to do testing, monitoring, and any remediation if necessary.
Thank you. And then just along those lines, a list of, so we have a sense of what are the planned projects, HVAC projects coming up, any that have been delayed. Is that available? That's not currently available, I don't think, on the website.
It's not on the website. I know we have shared with the Board of Ed in the past, and it's certainly something that we can
Just as we're considering this part of the CIP, I think, if you could update that list and share it, I think everyone should see. But, realizing that it's an important issue and there's challenges there, and just kind of where you are in the process of updates.
And it is a great question. We heard testimony from schools like Gaithersburg Middle saying we were promised this, and through various delays, through inflation, projects did get delayed over time, but they're certainly still there. So that is a great question, and one that we've heard quite a bit from folks about as well.
Dr. McKnight.
Yep, we can share with you ones that we've actually put up before that have been delayed. I'll say Burtonsville Elementary is an example of one that we brought back because we've had planning money in the CIP, over time, and, wanted to come back and make sure we resolve that. But we will continue to work down that list. One of the things that we are up against with our CIP right now is, as you can see, in some ways, some of our projects have doubled in costs because of inflation, and not only that, just even getting some of the materials and other things that have just delayed projects. So we're being very thoughtful about that because we also don't want to over-promise and under-deliver as well. So we'll definitely follow up and share that with you, but know that that's something that we've taken under much consideration and discussion with the Board of Education so that we can map out exactly how we want to resolve any projects that have come up before that are still in need.
And yeah, and important, obviously, I'll turn to Mr. Levchenko in a moment, we all have a countywide imperative around racial equity and social justice, and we want to be in all this work because there are never unlimited dollars, as much as I would love that. We need to factor that into our decisions. So I think that type of information will help us get to that point. Before I turn to Mr. Levchenko, you started it around this line, so we can get to Councilmember Rollins' question. I wanted to ask how much of these increases are due to inflation versus other things, like we decided to build a new school, right? Like in the case of Burtonsville Elementary. Could you talk about that? I know inflation's a large part of it, and cost of materials, but go ahead.
I'll start with what we were talking about. You mentioned Burtonsville Elementary as one. That project, I will say, stands out as one that's a good example to talk about, actually. Not that the funds there are increased because of inflation, but the funds there have been increased because we've spent some time with that community. Look back at, over time, design money had been put into the CIP and not approved over time. And the one thing that I'll say about Burton's Elementary that is different from any other school in Montgomery County is it is located behind a shopping center. It is the only one in our entire system, meaning there is no really clear direct access from a road to be able to access that school, and it's a school in East County. And so that's an example of one that we spent time with the community and really had to do some work to get them to trust us, that this wouldn't be an opportunity where we were going to put money in the budget again for a design that then ended up being taken away, but recognizing the best thing for students, the best thing for the safety of our students, and the best thing for that community is to be located in a different location, just like all of the other 209 schools in Montgomery County, so that community members can access their schools, students can walk to and from safely and not have to have all of the difficulties, quite frankly, that they've had for so many years in just getting to school, because they don't have a direct access. So when you look at that project specifically, that was one in which we made a decision, the Board of Education, and we talked about the importance of working with that community and why a new school was appropriate. However, we had to do a lot of work with that community to trust that would happen. We could have put less money in to fix the edges, but we also know that's this community and this school deserve a school for the reasons that I've mentioned. So that's one. Mr. Adams, I'll let you talk further about the specific costs around inflation.
Yeah, I was thinking about this chart in particular.
Yeah, so certainly inflation is the driver behind much of this. Burtonsville, as was talked about, is a change of scope, but it was previously in the CIP. The only project in here that was removed is the materials management warehouse. Everything else was previously approved, and is obviously reflected now based on current cost estimates and other factors. But this is a very compelling slide, and I will say that when we went through our estimates, there's a variety of factors that we put forth that we presented to the board of how we're trying to curtail these increasing costs, things that we're doing very differently now than what we've done in the past. But these numbers right here represent the projects based on where we are with shrinking as small as we can possibly get. But they represent the state's eligibility number. The state puts out what they will fund up to in terms of a match. So these numbers reflect really maximizing those state funds. The one thing I would just caution, though, is that we've worked through this, is that this is a very volatile market right now. Construction market trends are all over the place. These numbers represent probably something in the neighborhood of about $460 a square foot. Again, that's from the state perspective of match. We have our peers next to us in Prince George's County, in Baltimore County and City, that have just bid projects over $800 a square foot. So by no means are we out of the woods from an inflation standpoint, but what I can say is that we're doing everything that we can internally to make sure that we are maximizing the state dollars, any of the federal funds that may be coming out through Inflation Reduction Acts, to really try to manage this. But the theme of this request is really inflation. It's like I said, $2.5 million is the only item in here that's an add that was not previously included in the CIP.
I appreciate that, and it was one of those, when I asked a question I knew the answer to, but I wanted you to say it that way because I think it's really important. As having been on this committee the last 4 years, I know these projects, and these are projects that we talked about that were very important for equity reasons, that we've approved, that are in the CIP, and that there are serious needs. I think that's important as we soberly look at this, of what we've said we're going to do and how that has changed. So we'll get to the how in a second, or what some of the options might be going forward. But I want to turn to Councilmember Mink, I think is a question. And we'll move to you, Mr. Levchenko.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. McKnight, for those words about Burnsville Elementary School. Such an important project and a unique project, and I'm really glad that you have pulled our attention to that. And I appreciate you all working so closely with the community there. I know that it means a lot to them. I've been working with them closely and in close communication with them for the past couple of years as well. And I know that there are serious trust issues there to overcome. They were very hesitant to support the idea of the construction of a brand new school. And much of that was because they just didn't believe that it would happen, that proposing that would result in them not even being funded for the renovations that they desperately need. And then the new school would get delayed and not get done, and they would be left with really nothing, which has been the case in large part for the last decade. And the community there is very tight-knit. They're very dedicated to that school. The PTA there has won multiple awards for their dedication to both the staff and the students and the school grounds. I've been there on campus with them doing, gardening and beautification projects, taking care of the playground. They got some state funding to do a little outdoor renovation, but the staff and the PTA there are all very close with each other and really have put a lot of time and energy and heart into making that space that they have as welcoming and beautiful as possible. And we've got a lot of kids there who are, finding joy and happiness as a result. But we also have kids who are, wearing coats, winter coats in their classrooms, who are having lunch at, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. because they don't have space there. So I just really appreciated you all prioritizing this line item and want to emphasize how important I believe it is as well that we do not go back on our promises to this community. It is absolutely an equity issue. We have a needs assessment now, a programming assessment that is part of how we order and rank which projects get done, and that's incredibly important. But before that went into effect, just a few years ago, we saw a lot of other schools that are now ranked much lower on the list because of that assessment. We saw those getting funding and getting completed, and then we reordered our list, taking into account needs and programming, and all of a sudden now we have these big budget shortfalls and we're having difficulty getting these projects done. So I think that really underscores the mandate we have to do everything we can to get these projects done as a matter of equity. And we absolutely have something to prove here to the community as well. And same thing with Greencastle. And I wondered if you could just briefly speak to really emphasize what would be the consequences of further delaying these projects.
Very good question, Councilmember Mink. The first thing that I'll say is the consequences that we are not creating conditions for our students to be able to best learn. You gave some perfect examples in terms of the impact, the real impact in the building when students need, and we have got to do everything to make sure that they are focused, that our staff are not making provisions that they shouldn't necessarily have to make. Because we can't get the funding in place. I know at Greencastle specifically, and I'll let Ms. Adams speak more specific. There are a number of things that we needed to do at Greencastle Elementary that we constantly hear from that community. One was around the outside area, in which the playground area, I believe, that oftentimes is not what we need it to be for students to be able to take advantage of that time. You think about social emotional wellness, it's important. So I think the consequences are that we would delay, and every time we delay, we then create more time for there to be more out-aged infrastructure systems to worsen, and then we're then in the situation in which we have to spend even more because we haven't been able to pay attention to the immediate needs to remedy. So, that's one way that I'll say it. I also wanted to circle back to, because this actually gives a perfect example too, as you were talking about Burtonsville. We also are required by the blueprint to expand pre-K exponentially. Now, the good news is we've already gotten a great start, and we're beyond the blueprint requirement currently for that pre-K expansion in Montgomery County Public Schools. But when we also look at this area like Greencastle and Burtonsville Elementary in East County, we've also identified that's an area in which we need to increase pre-K access to families. We need to look at our buildings, because for buildings like, for instance, Burtonsville that will get that we've put in the request for a new infrastructure, we need to utilize then the existing building for pre-K services. So as we think about all of these projects in our CIP, at the same time, we're thinking about any buildings that are going to be available for use. We're going to need to dedicate that towards pre-K. It's almost as if the expectation of expansion of pre-K has outnumbered the amount of facility space that we have. So we've got to look at the facility space and be able to keep that caught up with the enrollment that we want to reach. So those are the examples that I'll share, because those are real numbers and a real expectation for us to be able to do that, and our community needs it. When our children go in our pre-kindergarten programs, they come into kindergarten much more prepared, and so we need to create the opportunity for that to happen.
Thank you very much. All right, well, let's turn, now we know why it's needed from your perspective. Let's turn to the situation we're in with what this county executive has sent over and where we are in this amendment year, and then getting into Councilmember Albanaz's question. Mr. Levchenko.
Yeah, just one process point. This committee will be meeting at least once and probably twice more to discuss some of these very issues you're talking about, the project-by-project review. So we've been writing down all the questions you've been asking now. They don't necessarily have to be fully answered today. The committee will have time to go back to them. And we'll identify other issues when we talk with schools and executive staff. So we will have an opportunity to have that project-by-project review.
Yeah, this is the start, not the
Exactly. But I did want to highlight where things stand now, since we have the benefit of the executive's recommended CIP amendments, which came over last week. That provides an opportunity to look at how things balance under the executive's assumptions, how that relates to the approved CIP, and what that means for the council going forward. And we've brought up the first table from the staff report, which breaks out the original approved numbers, the Board of Education's amended CIP numbers, and then the executive's recommended CIP, or amendments. And I'll get into the specifics of the executive's amendments in a minute. But first, just wanted to sort of walk through this a little bit. The approved CIP was about $1.77 billion. The board's requested amendments totaled about $1.94 billion, so that's about $166 million over the 6 years. As is typical with the school CIP, it tends to be fairly front-loaded. Projects are identified, have to go through a design and construction process typically. That's going to be usually in the first 4 years of the CIP if they're looking to start it in that next year. And then you have the level of effort projects like HVAC, PLR, roofs. If they're asking for bumps in those also are probably going to be in those first few years as well. So it's not surprising, but it does create some challenges going forward. And then with the executive's recommendation, he, of course, is looking at the full CIP and then determines typically what's been done with past executives and with this executive. He makes an affordability calculation for the schools as well as parks and the college. It does not identify a specific set of project deferrals or reductions, but identifies what can be afforded within the broader CIP. And so what you see in the executive's recommended numbers, he comes up with about a $1.87 billion. That's about $61 million or $61 million difference from the board request. And as I mentioned, the board request was front-loaded. The executive's reductions in that area are front-loaded as well. So that those gaps by year, which all have to be addressed by the time the council takes action, we do have some challenges in those first few years. Now, in terms of what's in the executive's recommendation, I'm going to ask Essie to move us to table number 3. This table, it's actually a fairly short table. I mentioned earlier about the affordability project. There are some technical adjustments made to some projects here where there were some dollars accelerated in ahead in the CIP. And also there's some state aid adjustments that are made throughout the executive's recommendation. But really the affordability reconciliation, which is the lower set of numbers, it's a $51 million total reduction. With all the reductions are actually in the first 3 years, and then some of them are restored in 27 and 28, and then the 51 million, as I mentioned, is a actual reduction from the 6 years. So that becomes the opening challenge that this committee has, and then at the broader council level, with reductions in parks and college, and with some of the reductions in transportation that were discussed. That whole picture has to be worked out by the council. But for this committee, we have this immediate issue of, at a minimum, figuring out what to make of the executive recommendation and how one would get to the executive's numbers if one were to try to solve that problem completely within the school's portion of the CIP. Now, of course, the council can choose its priorities as it sees fit by the time we get to the end. But we need to have those tools available to this committee and to the council as to what are the trade-offs here. What would have to be reduced, if we were to make reductions. Of course, the council can also look at the revenue side, what can be done on the revenue side, and we're going to have a little bit more discussion of that at the full council. We have our spending affordability guideline discussion in early February, where you talk about the size of the CIP and what can be afforded at the full CIP level in terms of bonds. But you can also look at some other significant assumptions in the CIP, such as PAYGO, or current revenue that is used to fund what would otherwise be bond-eligible projects. Those numbers can also be discussed and have a direct link to the operating budget. If you increase it in the CIP, that's fewer funds available in the operating budget. You can look at recordation taxes and impact taxes and things like that. Those are areas that have been adjusted in the past, and the council has looked at those as potential revenue source increases in the past, and those can be looked at again as well on the revenue side. But from the perspective of the expenditure side here, what council staff is suggesting today as a process, and what we've done in the past, is ask MCPS to identify how they would get to the executive's recommended numbers for bond funding in the school CIP. It's a major challenge, and the committee has found it helpful in the past to hear what are the ways the schools would do that. What would be the pain, if you will, to get to those numbers, at least from the perspective of schools. The council has not always gone forward with the adjustments as reflected by MCPS, but it gives that great weight, and that helps. The other area where it may help is make it very clear what is the impact of these reductions going forward. That's helpful to the council as a whole to understand trade-offs elsewhere in the CIP. I think it's also helpful in terms of working with the state to say, we need more state aid. Here is why. If circumstances don't change in some way, we have these projects that are at risk. And that provides more clarity rather than just seeing a number that may not have much impact on people. They'll see actual projects that could be at risk if one were to not be able to exceed what the executive has included in his CIP. Now, once again, I want to emphasize it's the council's CIP. The council can make its choices. It's not limited by what the executive recommends, but the executive has at least provided one option that can inform us and give us a baseline to start from at least. So as I note at the end of the packet, the staff's recommendation today is that the committee formally ask MCPS to develop a scenario or scenarios of how they would get closer to the executive's recommendation. And then when we get that back, we can then reconvene as a committee, discuss those what we definitely would call non-recommended reductions, as well as all the project-by-project reviews I mentioned earlier to identify what's already being requested and make sure the committee understands and supports those amendments as well.
Thank you, Mr. Levchenko. And before we make that formal request and take that action, I want to make sure that Councilmember Albornoz gets to ask his. I know that probably answered some of it, but he probably has some more.
No, I appreciate that, and I got a little ahead of myself there in terms of the presentation, and we are very fortunate to have Mr. Levchenko, who has been through many CIPs, and the team does as good a job as anybody could hope in terms of reconciling these challenging puzzle pieces. I just want to highlight something that Councilmember Mink said earlier, which was so important, and that's the issue of trust. So many of these communities have been waiting so long, and some of those communities who have been waiting an especially long time don't have as organized a group or body advocating on their behalf. And so as we all have to make difficult decisions and try to put this jigsaw puzzle together with the resources that we have, I know and I'm sure all of my colleagues will be looking at through a lens that takes that into account, but also the practical reality that's on the ground. And one thing I would like to request, Mr. Levchenko, and you sort of alluded to this, but there is obviously a cost if we don't move some of these projects forward sort of on the back end, for example, HVAC projects. If we don't advance those, then the maintenance that will be impacted on the operating budget may supersede the cost of what's in the CIP if we don't address those issues now. So, and the same is probably true for some of these other projects. And it's difficult to look at things through that perspective, but I think it should be weighed as we make those difficult decisions on what the return on investment is, or the lost opportunity cost, if we don't advance some of these projects moving forward.
Just a quick response. We'll certainly look at that. I know the racial equity issues and social justice issues came up earlier. Staff has noted in the packet that we've gone through that exercise the past couple of years and worked with executive staff on looking at those metrics. Fortunately, with the school system, we do have a lot of data. So we are able to present that kind of demographic information to the committee, often very specific to projects. So that data can be used as part of the committee's project-by-project review and help inform the decisions the council ultimately makes. And you're absolutely right, to the degree we delay a project that we know we need, we're just pushing that problem out a couple of years and going to have to revisit it in the next CIP and find room for it down the line. So there's no free lunch. You pay now or you pay later. Our challenge is that if we have a CIP that's a 10-pound bag, we have to find a way to fit 15 pounds into it. And that's a challenge this year, especially in an amendment year, where we don't want to try to open the full CIP. That would not go well. So we do try to work with what we absolutely have to do this year, understanding that we're going to have to come back next year with a full CIP and address some of those out-year issues that you just mentioned. Some of the consequences of delaying projects is that you are kicking the can down the road and having to deal with it next year. So that's the balance that we'll have to make this year.
Thank you for the understatement of all understatements, Keith. Ms. Lukey has a question. Councilmember Lukey.
You raised a great point, which is you're either going to pay for it now or you're going to pay for it later. And usually if you're paying for it later, you're paying a lot more for it later. But one of the concerns or questions I have is, and you were talking earlier about looking at programs that were successful, right? And just in the concept of like more operational budget kind of stuff. And sometimes we need to flip it and say not just what's working, but where is it not working, or who am I not reaching? And in the context of the school construction piece and the project management piece, my concern is, it's one thing to appropriate the funds, it's another to really get that ball rolling, right? And where are we perhaps as a county not doing a good job of pushing things forward fast enough? Not just from a appropriation standpoint, but from an operational standpoint in terms of now we've approved the project's funded in these years, right? But where are we now having delay so that we're going through the design process? Well, now the design's stale and now it's old and has to be redone and we still haven't broken ground, because I think that is something, particularly the communities that have not had the voices that they might deserve here at the council or in state government or county government as a whole, are concerned about, because they hear a thing will happen and then it's not actually happening. And that's a hard thing to explain to a community who's been waiting and having their can kicked down the road for a long time.
Yes, thank you. The one challenge is when it's not, we plan for a project to be funded and then it's not funded. And then we have to then share that unfortunate news with the community. That does impact them to lose trust and wonder when it's going to happen. In terms of the project management piece, I'll defer to Mr. Adams specifically to talk about that, because with the projects that we're funded for, we move forward with them. COVID-19 was a different situation in which, we had to work with contractors being able to come out and stay on project, being ill and then dealing with parts and things not coming in, and then of course inflation happening while a project is already underway and having to finish it, because we won't in Montgomery County just leave a project sitting there unfinished. We make that commitment to our community. But those are the examples of when I can share that delays happen, but essentially every project that we put forward that we recommend to be funded, we come and we recommend that in our CIP and we move forward if we receive the funding for it. Mr. Adams, anything to add?
No, I would just say I think I would put our construction program up against any other program in the state, across the country. I mean, we have really have seen minimal impacts, and the team has done a tremendous job to change the way we approach projects, to do different things to minimize any delays that you may hear. I would say though one of the challenges when we talk about communities is, as a Board of Education, as an agency that's not a funding body, we are usually the bearer of bad news, right? So if projects are not funded, if construction's not funded but design is, we're usually the ones out there trying to explain, well, there's going to be a couple year delay before we can get to a project, and we're hopeful that we can create more joint relationships to be able to build back trust with communities, because that has been a challenge over the years, is that excitement, everyone gets excited, funds might not be there, and then we have to try to explain why, right? And so hopefully this year we can fully fund, because these are all important projects, and hopefully we don't have to do that, but certainly that has been an experience over the years.
I will say, from my experience, if projects are not seeing major changes in scope or are not delayed in terms of funding, we do see the projects almost always open on schedule. And that's why, because they have opening dates that are critical. Unlike other county government projects, if a fire station is delayed 6 months or a year, it's unfortunate, but you don't have students waiting to go, first day of school. They do, so they time everything to typically to the August opening, or sometimes January reopening. And unless there is something significant happening to the project, not implementation, but scope, as I mentioned, or some sort of conditions on the ground, they have historically been projects that have landed on schedule.
Thank you. It's one of the reasons I'm going to turn to Councilmember Mink, who has a project-specific question, and then we'll wrap up this session shortly thereafter. It's why I think it's important when we do ask you for these non-recommended cuts, that the other bit of information that will be helpful to come back to us is where you are in the process of these projects, to the extent that you are, I think most of them are, they're in various stages. Burtonsville obviously isn't started yet, but you're looking to do that. But just so that it's very clear that we have the picture of what the cost is, as all my colleagues have said, of not proceeding, and what you have already done, so that just we're very clear on that, and we have all that information. If you could do that. Councilmember Mink.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask briefly about Poolsville. So I know that the Poolsville community fought for years to get funding committed for a major expansion and renovation project that is underway there. I was actually there just recently meeting with some of the student leaders, and I know that you all have requested additional funding this year in the amended CIP for cost increases there. The students are dealing with the construction noise during test taking and all those sorts of things. Wondering if we can have a brief general update on the status of that project, and also is a new full-size gym being built as part of that new construction, and additionally is MCPS coordinating with HHS to include a wellness center within the new construction project.
Sure. So the Poolsville project is one that we've had many conversations, and I think there's actually lessons to be learned from the engagement with that community that hopefully we can carry forward to all communities. But the project is moving along well. It's broken into a couple phases. The first phase is to build the main academic wing, move students out of the older building into their main academic wing, and then go back into the existing building and do demolition and modification. So we're on track for the end of this summer, early fall, for students to transition into their new academic spaces. And then that phase 2 work. What you're seeing here is an $8 million request based on the phase 2 work, which is to go back into the building. We are also, as part of that $8 million that you see here, is planning for a new full-size gym. What we've talked about over the years is that the playing surface doesn't necessarily change, but spectator size is changing. So in terms of building them a new gym, it's really to account for that community to be able to support, the school as we go forward. So we're hopeful if this funding comes through, all the aspects of Poolsville and the community engagement and advocacy will be met. The one element, though, that you did bring up is the HHS funding around the Wellness Center. We do see that the design is being funded or recommended to be funded within the county executive's budget. And then so certainly we would start the design in concert with both HHS and the community. But I just wanted to, based on the current information and recommendations, construction funding is not approved for that, only design. So I just wanted to be very clear about that perspective.
Go ahead, Ms. McGuire.
And I just wanted to share a little context there. The Wellness Center project is, well, certainly in coordination with MCPS, is actually funded in county government through the Health and Human Services CIP, and it is an item that this committee takes up jointly with the Health and Human Services Committee. So we'll be coming back to talk broadly about the prioritization as well as the program of requirements and some of the scope and programming issues that relate to both, of course, the construction and facility design aspects, but also the programmatic design aspects of that. So I just wanted to say that we will come back to a fuller conversation of that in a joint committee session within the next couple of months.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And if I could ask, great. Also, a more general question. We've got some of our artificial fields that are reaching the 10-year mark, and so wanted to see if there are plans for dealing with that, since that creates a safety issue, of course, for our kids. And I think we have Wooten that went over the hardness threshold of late, so just wanted to see what the thinking was there.
Yes, we are planning for the replacement of 3 of those fields. So one is Wooten, the other is Gaithersburg, and the third is Paint Branch. So as we move through the process of doing the replacement, those are the older fields that have the synthetic infill. As we move to the replacement, it does become a fuller redesign so that we meet the council's requirement to install organic infill. So we'll start beginning to meet with those communities to talk about the replacement process for all 3 of those projects.
We would love some more detail on what we mean when we say organic infill specifically, and what are some of the options that are being considered there. Thank you.
Always a lot of fun talking about fields. We do that a lot here at the council. And I know you give the board I believe a monthly
construction update. Is that correct? If you maybe just forward that to us, that would be helpful, just so we're keeping tabs on it too, and we can incorporate that into, especially as we're dealing with CIP. Okay, Councilmember Mink, one more question.
Thanks for letting me on this committee, y'all. Got a lot of questions. So my understanding also is that MCPS plans to incorporate all gender bathrooms in several of the upcoming CIP projects, which is fantastic. These restrooms are absolutely common sense. They will increase student safety, decrease negative events in restrooms like bullying and vandalism, and they're going to save the school system money in new facilities, which we are thrilled about. Is there a stated MCPS policy that all new facilities will include all gender bathrooms?
Yes, every facility that we construct does include, gender neutral facilities, whether it's an addition or a full building. I would say though that we are at all these newer projects, Poolsville, the other high schools, really looking at different ways of constructing restrooms, very different than what we're used to, is the very gender-specific group toilet rooms. So we're hopeful that that is something that we find great success with, and provide our students with, both safety, security, but also, that element of being in a place where facilities are available and that they're not searching throughout the building, and that they feel very comfortable using it. So we're very hopeful that this initiative is one that will be successful. I would say though it's student driven, so we're following the lead of students on this one. So this is a really good thing.
That's fantastic. Love all of that. Love that that is included as a priority for innovation, and that you're thinking about it in that way, and love that you're prioritizing student voices. They know the scene on the ground better than anyone else, and they tend to be, ahead of the times in a lot of these spaces as well. So that's really fantastic. And then also just wanted to check, since of course the vast majority of our schools are not going to be undergoing a major capital project anytime soon, is there, or what is the plan for providing safe all-gender restroom options at our current facilities?
So that is part of this funding request, is to add money to continue to build momentum and obviously make that a bit more of a robust program. Current state is that we work with individual schools and go out and make sure we add facilities to meet student needs. We want to be more proactive, and that's the proactiveness is represented in this request.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Would love some details on, the system, the order, all that kind of thing, because I know that there have been, parents who are advocating. We advocate with the principals and the school, and so on. So if there's a systemic measure being implemented, that's wonderful news, and would love to be part of that conversation and get that information. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think just along with tracking everything, you're asking for money for it. Great. I'm assuming some of that's for a plan, and you can. Part of that, when you come to us, can be like, well, here's what we've done, here's what we're going to do, here's the order, to the extent that as that's becoming more together, I think it'd be good to have that as part of this context as well. So thank you, Councilmember Mink. And as Mr. Levchenko said, we want all the tools available to us. And so, on the revenue side and on the non-recommended reduction side, so we will, without objection, we will ask for these non-recommended cuts to come back to us in February based on the county executive's $61 million number here. But I do want to say that, as was mentioned, we're going to have a larger discussion at the council about the spending affordability guidelines, how much money we can borrow for normal people to build things. Also, state aid, which has been mentioned a couple times. I actually spoke to Governor Moore, really cool to say that, over the weekend about this issue, about the fact that we, as the largest school system in the country, in the state, 14th or 15th largest in the country, right? So, we are one of the largest, that we have seen, as others in the state, really large increases due to cost of materials, inflationary increases. And, he said that a part of their budget that they're put forward is to address the cost of increased construction for schools. And, what that means at the end of the day, once it goes through the process, we won't know right away, but it is something they're aware of. And I think, we will work with that, and someone else on this table has someone who can help us work with that too, Mr. Lukey, and the administration, and so we'll be talking. We're going to use all tools that are available to make sure that we're trying to do. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to make tough decisions. We're going to have to figure out what we do at the county level too. There's going to be a role, and this is what we're asking you to come back with is a gap on top of a gap, right? In that even though the CE made some assumptions, it's still more than the current CIP is approved for, right? So we're asking you to base your non-recommended assumptions on meeting the CE's number, but we're going to have to look at the whole pie. And you have a commitment from me as chair, and I know as you've heard today that from all of my colleagues in different ways, these were things that we said we were going to do, and we worked with the community to do. And so we have to put the right pieces together between state aid, local revenue, but one of those is we need to have prioritization. That is a tool we need, and that's what we're asking you to do to come back. If you had to do this, which I know you don't want to do, what would that prioritization be? Looking at a racial equity and social justice lens on all those factors. So without objection, I'd like to ask my colleagues that you would do that. Come back to us with those non-recommended cuts, and we'll take them up at a later date. Mr. Levchenko.
Yeah, and we will actually have a draft a letter to go to NCPS with more detail.
I'll ask you more formally, yes.
So
the without objection is to send the letter.
So the expectations will be clear in the letter from what you want, and they'll know what they need to do.
Perfect. So it's coming. That'll come to you in short order, but now you heard it from us. Is there anything else we need to cover? Dr. McKnight or anyone else? Anything you want to add?
Just want to say thank you for the discussion today. Councilmember Joanda, you're absolutely right. We are the largest in the state and the 14th largest in the nation, and again, an enrollment that continues to grow. I'll just leave us, with one thing to think about. We're now, this year, we've returned to pre-pandemic numbers of over 160,000 students. So we're on the trajectory, and we're not going to stop at this point. I can just tell you from looking at the growth in MCPS over years, the pandemic was something no one expected, but we are going to recover, and what we've got to prepare for is the 167,700 students that we're projected to have by 2028. And that means, as was so eloquently said earlier, as we kick the can down the road, we can't kick the can too far because we have to provision for where we are right now and for the enrollment that is going to continue to increase, which means more space. So I'm looking forward to us walking this together and doing this work together. We will absolutely follow up as you have stated, and I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I also wanted to share in my thanks for this great conversation that we've had today. I think it's very promising about our collaborative work going forward. I know you get how important facilities are for our students, the message that it signals our families. We care about you. You deserve the best, bright, colorful environments to learn and to teach, right? If you're a new teacher coming to Montgomery County, do you want to work in a facility where the kids have to wear their jackets because of the HVAC issues that we know exist in some of our older facilities? So super important. I know you get it. I know you have been to a lot of these schools that are on the list, but I encourage all of the council members to visit these schools because you're probably going to get emails from school communities pointing these things out. And if you've seen them by yourself, I think it'll make a big difference to them and to the whole process. So thank you again for the conversation, and look forward to the work ahead.
Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues. I'm glad you mentioned that. I meant to mention this at the top, but similar to what I did with the libraries, now we have a new lead for libraries. I'm going to be visiting all of the 25 clusters here over the next 2 years and invite, I know colleagues will join along to some of those visits. And so to your point, I think it's really important to do that. So with anything else, we're adjourned. Thank you.